MIDDLEKAUFF! Hey, hey! What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition. Haberman and MIDDLEKAUFF. I'm Guy. That's John. You may be watching this on our YouTube channel, which is great. If you are, thank you for the support. Share it with your friends. Subscribe and hit that like button. And check out our podcast. This is all available in podcast form down in the description below. If you are listening to the podcast, hell yeah. You know what we're approaching, John, is mailbag season. So I've looked. Many of you have gotten in the mailbag over the last several months. But mailbag season may be quickly approaching. Well, that'll be a part of the weekly show. So you can get back in that. Leave us a review. 5 stars. We haven't promoted in a while, so I'm sure we need to freshen up the mailbag here coming up soon. But you get into the mailbag by leaving us a question as an iTunes review on Apple Podcasts with a 5-star review. We appreciate it. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can watch this show. It's in the description of the podcast. The YouTube link is there.
Do it.
Great growth over the season, another year. We started this podcast back in October of 2016. And to everybody who's jumped on board in the last year, awesome. Thank you. Let's keep this sucker rolling and, keep telling people about it. We appreciate that very much.
Been able to feed our families.
That's right.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And John's shopping habit. Thank you for feeding.
Appreciate you.
The hoodie habit on this show. Man, there's a lot to get to today.
It really is. That's why you probably just need to maybe take a shot at Tito's before we dive into it all. I would imagine Russell Wilson and Nick Caserio maybe shot at Tito's today, landing new coaches.
Russell Wilson in charge of the Broncos search.
I bet he played a role.
You think Russell's aware that they hired a new coach today?
Great. Maybe his bodyguards told him.
Hey, Russ, Sean Payton, back. Step back, sir. Step back. But that's a separate conversation. Tito's Handmade Vodka, bringing you the show throughout the football season. And now, don't forget, with the Pro Bowl games. I don't know if you noticed they call it that, the Pro Bowl games, because it's like flag football and some other bullshit. All the greats will be there playing quarterback. Tito's for that. Maybe a Tito's. This is the Pebble Beach Pro-Ams this weekend. So sidle up to the old TV and watch a little Pebble with some Tito's. The Super Bowl, you're going to somebody's house, take some Tito's. You're hosting people at your house. Have some Tito's. I would say this, if you're going somewhere to somebody's house, take the Tito's and take like some of the Arizona iced tea, Arnold Palmer's for the mix, or take some ginger beers, take some lemons. Always you show up to a party, you bring the you bring the Tito's, you keep a couple limes in your pocket, because invariably 9 times out of 10 this happens. The host says, we're low on limes. If you bring some limes, you're always going to be a hero. I would say that. If you're always bring some limes. No one's ever going to say no thank you for limes. They're always 9 times out of 10 they need you.
Well, how often too do people show up with, maybe a couple Mexican beers as well? So you just, booze. The limes always go well. I'm with you. Get on that right now. Tito's, our friends at Tito's, we love you. It's been a great football season. Another very successful season. Couldn't have done it without you. Look forward to 2023 and beyond, baby.
That's right. Tito's Handmade Vodka, distilled and bottled in Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume. Namely 80 proof. Crafted to be savored responsibly.
Speaking of the Pro Bowl, you know how those guys made it. Did you see the story today that it happened as well last year, that Josh Allen bowed out with an injury, and for the second straight year he will be playing at Pebble Beach and Spyglass this upcoming week?
I did see that story, yes. Good for Josh. Have you been to the Pebble Beach Pro-Am?
I have.
You and I went to the U.S. Open.
We went to the U.S. Open, the Gary Woodland one. But
for the Pro-Am, do you have to park your car and then take shuttles the same way we did for the U.S. Open, you think?
No, you can park. It's a little easier to get to. I saw the list of celebrities. I think the tournament peaked like 5 years ago because the pros, they go to Saudi now, they get paid. And even the list of celebrities, it's not quite as Tiger, Phil. You used to be can't miss, I'd say, a decade ago. It's not quite as good.
Yeah.
Rodgers is there. He's probably a couple, Jake Owen, Bill Murray always go, but it's not, I think it's lost a little bit of its luster.
All right, John, we have a lot to dive into. Do we start with Sean Payton or D'Amico Ryans?
Well, they're kind of interconnected, if you believe our man Rap Sheet.
Rap Sheet tweeted that with D'Amico all but set to take the Texans job, or really set to take the Texans job, the Broncos must have viewed him as their top choice, made another push on Tuesday to convince him to take their job. Once it was clear to them he was not going to take their job, they pivoted to trade a first and a second for Sean Payton, who looked like he was prepared to maybe just sit this next season out on the sidelines and go on Cowherd once a week. And instead, he's going to become the Broncos coach.
Albright, who I think now works at a radio station that is the radio station of the Broncos, and he lives there and is super locked in with that organization, as well as Kliss, who transitioned as well as you can to clearly be the number one John Elway source to just the other guys in the organization. So he's pretty locked and loaded. Had been tweeting about D'Amico, I'd say, for the last month. The interest level, and definitely the last couple of weeks. Denver wanted him. And, Houston, he signed a 6-year deal, Kyle style. And I also think when you look at the landing pad of just, you kind of get to mold it. They have the Browns pick the next 2 years, where the Broncos are kind of the opposite. They're missing picks because of Russell, and you don't have a quarterback. Now, you got to get a quarterback, but I'd rather not have a quarterback and have $1 million picks with a 6-year contract, try to figure it out, than be stuck with a guy if I didn't like the guy as a player, and when you factor in the contract that has not even started yet. I think D'Amico made the right move, and I think Sean Payton's taken a pretty risky move. Yeah. When Andy Reid, who I would say was in somewhat of a similar situation to Sean, obviously Andy got fired from the Eagles, Sean retired. Retired feels strong. He just took a year off. Is that a better way to put it, you think, with Sean Payton?
Never. I think from very quickly it was clear he was coming back. Just didn't want to coach the Saints anymore. Kind of felt.
Yeah. Remember Andy kind of interviewed, I think, with the Chargers, the Cardinals, and he ultimately took the Chiefs. The Chiefs that year had the number 1 overall pick, and he immediately knew that he could trade for Alex Smith. But he kind of got to mold the organization. They had a couple players there, but he got to put his stamp on it from a quarterback standpoint. This feels pretty risky. Like, to me, D'Amico, what's his risk? They've had 2 one-and-done coaches. They've been a fucking embarrassment. And he gets a 6-year contract. Under no circumstances are they going to fire him. And he's just really good. I think he's just really good.
Knows ownership. So, it's the potential, if it turns out like, I don't like working with Caserio, maybe he could win the power struggle. They've had power struggles there under ownership before that the head coaches won. Remember, Bill O'Brien won a power struggle with the front office once upon a time. And maybe in his mind, we'll see who is. I haven't seen him report on his offensive coordinator yet, but maybe Jimmy Garoppolo's his quarterback. I don't know.
I think you're going to say coordinator. I was like, player coach.
He did play against Davis. He did coach against Davis Mills, right? Was that last year? So I guess he has some idea what he is, but
I'd say Davis Mills is a starter. His time feels up.
It does. They've tried that for 2 years now. Yeah. So, and obviously he has a personal connection to the place. A wild turn of events, and really from before, like you made the point to me, 2 really good coaches just became head coaches on Tuesday, January 31st. From a Niners perspective, both of them went to the AFC. Not terrible.
Isn't it kind of crazy that
Cardinals haven't hired a coach yet? We don't quite know, what they're going to see there.
Well, think about this. Kyle's pumped out 2 coaches in the last 24 months, and both of them went to teams that he'll never see. I mean, these 2 guys, part of the Dan Quinn intrigue the last 2 years, like these guys work together. It'd be one thing if one of these guys had gone to Arizona or in divisional team or even a conference team. They've gone to the Texans and the Jets. When I close my eyes, I never envisioned the 49ers playing the Jets ever. And you're like the Texans, I have some memory like every 4 years. I do not remember any Jets games ever against the 49ers. I guess one game, the Garrison Hurst 80-yard run when I was like 18.
I remember I went to a Favre's game at Candlestick with the Jets, and he was bad. They were bad.
What year was that? Like 07?
I think it was a little
9, 8.
Yeah, something like that. Party bus, drinking the whole way. Barely remember. I think I napped during the game.
You would have to put the Jets, if you're like, what is the least likely matchup you ever envisioned the 49ers playing? The Jets feel at the top or near the top of that list. Of just like, can you envision this game? Like the
Oh, yeah,
NFC South games, like
Bosa
the
injury,
Saints, the
Bosa injury.
Panthers.
Both injury game.
Yeah, because they played them back to back. But it's just you just
Giants and Jets. Give me high fives.
obviously you play these teams every 4 years. Like you play every team in the league every 4 years. But yeah,
So that's good. L for the Niners, right? On a fundamental level, if they had 2 third-round picks and they could trade 2 third-round picks for D'Amico Ryans, they would trade 2 third-round picks for D'Amico Ryans. Doesn't work like that. They get a third for D'Amico because they already got 2 thirds from Rand Carthen. So the Niners have 3 thirds this year and another third next year for Rand Carthen. And the D'Amico third is 2025. They get a third-round pick for D'Amico. 10 third-round picks that Niners have gotten over the course of the
you're
last
saying
3
they
years.
don't get 2 threes next year, one for D'Amico and Rand?
Because you don't get, yeah, they get, I think you can max out at 3 per like cycle, I think was so they only get 1. But thanks to Rand Carthen, D'Amico Ryans, Mike McDaniel, Martin Mayhew, who am I missing? Oh, Robert Saleh. The Niners have stacked up 10 third-round picks over the last 3 years, even though it's not in a 3-year window that they get the picks because you got.
And next year not as important, right? Because they are going to have their first, their second, their third back.
Yeah, like this year they don't have a first. They traded their second for McCaffrey. They traded their third for McCaffrey. They traded a fourth for McCaffrey. So, which, hey, worth it.
Well worth it.
Well worth it. But they lose D'Amico Ryans. That's the headline that we're discussing there.
Who to me, Robert Saleh was an awesome dude, a fantastic coach, and a really good coaching candidate. I think D'Amico's on a different level. When you factor in, he was the defensive rookie of the year. He was defensive team captain for his team as a player immediately. Pro Bowl level guy. So like team captain, Pro Bowl level guy. I would say one of the true rocket ship careers of like Brandon Staley. I'm not quite sure how he's still around. Also a rocket ship career. Vic Fangio, position coach, within like 5 years as a head coach in the NFL, had never sniffed playing in the NFL and only coached at like John Carroll. D'Amico, NFL player, Alabama, sweet NFL player, team captain, character guy, assistant coach, lowest level, shoots up to be the coordinator immediately, and the defense got better. You know, it's just one of those rocket ships where you're like, yeah, there's no slowing it down. And everyone to a man's like, he's a star. You know, Fred Warner's like, yeah, he helped make my career.
Yeah. Remember you said the other day, Kyle called it years ago that D'Amico was, that this is what was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, the Ringer article, they just had all Kyle's quotes. It was like his whole career has been a prediction. He's going to be an awesome player. Boom. He's going to be a player, a Pro Bowl level guy. He's going to be a solid linebacker coach. He's going to be a good defensive coordinator. He's going to be a good head coach. Like, I wouldn't bet against this guy. Robert Saleh was more of a true head coaching, like bounced around, position coach, right? Was on a team with a lot of talent. Even the first couple of years, remember people kind of calling for his job, like, is he any good?
Is he? Yeah, I mean, is he true Shanahan tree? Because D'Amico is, right?
Yeah, I'd say Saleh, a little Pete Carroll there too. You know,
I would, but I'd also say he does not necessarily become a head coach unless he coaches with Kyle Shanahan. So
I'm saying Pete Carroll's tree because that's kind of where his coaching career started as in the NFL. Like D'Amico's entire coaching career is with Kyle.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just think it does feel like he's got he's more understated in terms of Vrabel's got a little cocky rah-rah to him. And every human's personality is different, but I think him and Vrabel are comparable in the sense of like, high-level players, everyone around him was like, this guy's a star. And then he gets into coaching, immediately star, and becomes a head coach. What's D'Amico? Our age? I mean, I don't even know if he's 40 yet. Might be 40 because he was, I think, offensive rookie of the year 07. He's 38?
38. Turns 39 in July.
So he'll coach his first NFL game as a 39-year-old?
Yes.
Wouldn't you say that 37 to 39 is kind of like the new NFL 45?
Yeah. Because, you know, and D'Amico's probably an example. For a guy that played in the league, well, I mean, he has only coached 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 6 years he's been coaching.
Came with Kyle.
So we are, you know, basically 15 years since his rookie year, he's an NFL head coach.
Did stop playing, though. You know, I think a lot of coaches often say about former players when they get frustrated, it's like, yeah, I've been coaching at 9 years when you were playing, so perfecting the craft. And that's what made, I think, D'Amico and Vrabel kind of unique. Like they were
At that
team captain. Yeah, they were team captains, the voice of the defense.
Played a position where you are the coach on the field, right? That helps.
Yeah, it's like, Wes, you were a slot receiver. It's like D'Amico's like, yeah, I was calling the defense. I did the signals.
Yeah, it's like the coaching equivalent of like quarterbacks get like all the shots to be broadcasters. It's because they just know everything. Yeah. Like it just translates. That's why Greg Olson's been like, I think tight ends, probably because they know blocking, they know pass game, they know run game.
Catchers with managers, right?
Yeah. Back when the managers used to make decisions during the game.
True.
Themselves.
I was thinking about that. The rumors, we'll see where we'll get into Vic here in a second, that Dan Quinn got paid like basically $5 million a year. And Vic was waiting for that contract because he's going to get like 5.5, 6. The coordinators in the NFL make dramatically, like, is there a major league manager that sniffs that amount of money anymore?
I think their salaries are going down.
Yeah. Wrong profession. I'd be a 38-year-old like hitting coach. I'd be like, I might just get into coaching football, man.
Or go coach college baseball.
Yeah.
Become a head coach and, yeah, that's a good idea. Just transition to like your college football's quality control coach.
But you and I talked about
that's
this.
That's not a bad idea. Just if you're the baseball coach, go to the football coach's office. Like, hey man, I don't know football, but I really know organization. Like I can just help. I can be in charge of like, organizing our fucking whatever it is that you guys do here. Not a bad idea.
As like the Alabama pitching coach making like 100, you go be Saban's head of recruiting and make like 700.
Yeah, you don't have to. How hard is it really?
You and I talked about this before we hopped on. You can't cook your books with these Rooney Rule draft picks. You have to be good. So you can hire all the minorities you want on a staff. If your team doesn't win, no one gives a shit. The reason the 49ers have cleaned up with these third-round picks, and they really have. I mean, they lead the league in them, and they literally have the max amount this year, and they're getting denied some in the future because they're getting pushed back. It's because they've had a lot of success. And these guys, especially Saleh, McDaniel, and D'Amico, are just, some of the best candidates on, in their coaching cycles. Now, you would say this upcoming staff, we'll see who Kyle names on defense. It doesn't feel, as of today, like there's a D'Amico Ryan's on the staff to be a head coach, but that's changed fast.
Yeah, I think the first question before you get to that, I agree with you, but I think the first question is, who does D'Amico take with him off of the 49ers staff? That's part of losing a coach is they take guys with them, right? And I think repeatedly, like D'Amico, you're just prepared to lose. You knew you're going to lose him at some point. I think every time you lose a coach, the question is going to be, can you keep Chris Kasarik? That's the number one question, right? Because his guy, the one thing and it's hard sometimes to know, like from a position coach standpoint, how good a coach is. There is no debate about who one of the best non-coordinator position coaches in the NFL is. It's Chris Kasarik. Period. Yeah. There's not a debate about it. So, he has stayed before. Multiple guys have left to become head coaches, and he has stayed. I always, for the 49ers, anytime a guy is going to leave to become head coach, will hold my breath. Is Chris Kasarik going to stay on the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan?
Well, remember a couple years ago when Saleh left, he basically said you can take one of the offensive guys, and he took LaFleur and not McDaniel. It was probably worked out best for McDaniel because in 2 years he became a head coach, right?
Yeah.
I guess it was only a year. When you look at all the guys McDaniel took, a lot of them felt like they were fired. John Embry, Wes Welker, like they weren't going to come back. It's going to be very, very fascinating on this staff because you'd say Kasarik and Forrester feel like they're not going anywhere. The O-line and D-line coach. Brian Greasy's probably not number one on D'Amico's list. What also makes D'Amico a little unique is he played for a lot of different coaches throughout the years, right? He played for the Texans, then he got traded to the Eagles. He was there for the Andy Reid staff, and he was there with Chip Kelly. His Rolodex of coaches is a little different than some of these typical like Kyle minions. Would it shock you if I like this guy from this, or we used to play against this guy, I got to know him in the division when I was in the NFC East, or I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see. Like ultimately Sean Payton, all his former guys that just got fired around the league, like Lombardi with the Chargers, like Lombardi's going to coach with him, and I would bet in Denver. D'Amico, who his offensive coordinator is, like, that's a fascinating hire. You know, is it
Kubiak?
Could be the dad. If you just tell me, Gary tells D'Amico, like, I'll come back and be your offensive coordinator for a year, help you get this thing going. Because he's going to need.
Maybe Daryl Tapp is his D-line coach.
Yeah, I could see something like that. They played together in Philly. But that's a pretty natural. You take the assistant if you like him, whatever. The assistant position coach. Who his offensive coordinator is. Like, if it is, I would say taking Kubiak's kid would be a pretty bold move. You know? It does feel like that position, maybe get like a former head coach. He's going to need a former head coach on his team.
Cliff Kingsbury?
Yeah, I mean, something like whatever that version is.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like a Pat Shurmur or someone that he's been around. Pat Shurmur's a guy.
McAdoo.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some guy like that written all over him.
Yeah.
Which is the smart move. You're going to be a head coach for the first time. Whether he calls defense or not, you probably want a guy that knows what he's doing with the offensive. Like the one thing you saw with LaFleur, he'd never been an offensive coordinator before, and it starts going wrong. It can get weird quick. At least when you got a guy and it goes weird, and it's a McAdoo, a Shurmur, a Kubiak, it's like, I've been around the block, guys.
They did have, they were supposed to have a veteran quarterback coach who died, who got hit by the bike like in Walnut Creek.
Knapp. Yeah.
Greg Knapp. That was part of the Michael LaFleur plan, right? It's like, we are going to have a veteran here for Zach Wilson. And then he was killed. But
I would say, though, when you have to do that, remember McVay hired Wade Phillips? And it was like, we want a veteran former head coach, but also just an older guy on the staff or the younger guy. When you have to hire for the quarterback and kind of your position and your coordinator, like that's a lot.
Yeah. Anthony Lynn, Justin on the stream suggests.
Yeah, I mean, something like that. Can't hate. I'm not worried about replacing a running back coach. Like Anthony Lynn.
Yeah, although I will, one thing, when the Niners started losing, you might remember when they started losing quarterbacks left and right in the NFC Championship game. One thing that didn't happen, like Shanahan didn't immediately go to the bench and just start. It was Anthony Lynn flipping through stuff with Juszczyk. It was Greasy going through stuff with Josh Johnson. It's hard to know sometimes what a QB coach. Just from the outside, you'd have to say Greasy probably had a good year in his first year coaching.
Yeah.
Right? I'd say it went pretty well for Greasy, all things considered.
I'd say, yeah. I'd say not bad.
I did a good job.
Honestly, Anthony Lynn, you could make fun of him, and I'm guilty as anybody for his Charger tenure. He's clearly a very high-valued offensive assistant in the NFL, right? I bet
yeah, and he's probably underutilized as a running backs coach.
But I think he was the assistant head coach as well. Not sure exactly. That's maybe a little more of a title, but to get a guy a little more cash. But it's a real title, right? Like that's Deuce Staley's title, running back coach, assistant head coach. I think, and you see that on the sideline, like you run shit when you got to. And Kyle doesn't budge from his.
Well, he has referees to scream at.
Yeah, that's true.
He has referees to scream at. There was kind of the domino effect on who the Niners get a defensive coordinator to talk about. Before we jump to that, though, we do have to just talk about the fact that Sean Payton just took the Denver Broncos job. Have you seen the money on that yet?
No.
God only knows how much money. What would be your guess?
5 years, $25 million a year.
5 years, $25 million a year.
So like $125 million contract.
I mean, I would say. Remember, wasn't the initial story he wants 20 to 25? Wasn't that the story out of New Orleans?
I just think all these college guys are signing 80 to 90 million. Like to me, Sean Payton's number is well above that.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos people are rich.
Now, part of it, those guys are signing 10-year deals, right? Because of recruiting, so it's a little different than NFL coaches.
I do wonder, would he want a longer contract than Russell? Every coach that coaches Russell loses their job.
I also think if you're an NFL coach and you're already super rich, and if things get weird, you could always. I mean, a guy like Sean Payton could get like a third job. Unlike college, you wouldn't want to sign like a 9-year contract.
Yeah, he might want to leave them.
He could just sign a 4-year, $100 million contract.
Like right now, he's stuck. Right? Like they had to trade a first and a second. His team is worse because he was under contract with the Saints. His team is worse because they had to give up picks.
Do you think that's fair? Like, it's one thing if you just fuck me and quit and I don't have a coach or whatever. You hired another coach who was on his staff that he brought. Like, you guys have moved on. I understand some compensation, but this notion that, like, they kind of got to hold him hostage. You're not paying him anymore. I would get it if you're paying him. I don't know. I mean, I
don't
get it.
love it. At the same time, he signed a contract that he just decided like we're going to suck. I don't want to be a part of this. Like, did they front load, like, did they, like, how much they gave him a lot of money, partly because, like, yeah, you're going to be our coach for the next X amount of years. Right.
If that's what they did, but if I'm just paying you by year, once I retire, you don't owe me any more money. If you gave me like a $50 million up front, I'd get it.
Retire, right? You're like loopholing your way out.
Yeah, I just need a change of scenery. So do you.
What about like a prescribed amount? Like, it's just always a third round pick when something like this happens, instead of a negotiation.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, part of like when Belichick got traded to the Pats from the Jets, he just quit on the Jets after a day. Remember when Gruden was literally the Raiders head coach. Like, this guy, they have another head coach with a whole staff.
And like next year, it would have cost just a second round pick to get him, right?
Yeah, and they've made all these moves. Like, they've just moved on. Like, they started dating someone new. Now, they were forced into it. I get it. So you got to be compensated a little bit, but I just feels
like too much. I agree with that.
It just feels like everyone's moved on.
But this is the way the world works. If I have possession of something, like, and you want it, there's a price.
Yeah.
But I don't love making teams give up trading first round picks for coaches. At the same time, they wanted D'Amico, per the reports, couldn't get him. So they were in a desperate situation. If he is a very good coach for them, he's well worth a first. And you're trying to save Russ. Like, you've got all this money invested in Russ. So you are kind of chasing your losses here, right? You are doubling down because you don't really have a choice.
Well, I saw someone tweeting about Sean Payton's contract. Ultimately, the contract is irrelevant to the football team, right? But it is relevant, the picks you traded. I do think they're put some added pressure when you trade a first and second round pick for a coach. They could be paying him $50 million, whatever. It has no impact on the roster or anything that goes on with football. To me, though, trading for the player or the picks I think there is tangible pressure on the Payton Russell regime, like, immediately.
Yeah. And I mean, if he makes Russ a solid quarterback, he's immediately worth the first round pick, right?
As long as they're winning, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and yeah. But
I'd say anything less than, like, they can't. I have a hard time seeing them, like, look decent and win 6 wins and it feel good. Right.
No, I think they got to be a playoff team because if Russ, they got good players on defense, they got good players on offense. If Russ is solid, why shouldn't they be a playoff team? Right,
like so bad.
Like a 9-win, like, yeah. That's what you're. Because now you're paying whatever 20 to 25 million, conservatively 20 million for your coach. What's Russ making next year? Whatever he's making. So we're probably talking $60 million between the two of them. Future is now. Like, when you start trading picks, it's just the future is now.
I know. Especially when the reason you got that pick is because you traded a pass rusher who you weren't going to resign, but still, I mean, that's a pretty good trade. To trade a guy that clearly probably is not worth a first round pick to get a first round pick back. Now, if Sean Payton's good, of course he's worth pick 30. Which,
yeah, $30 million in cash this year for Russ.
Who did the Bengals? The Niners had a better record than the Bengals. So the Bengals would be pick 29, the Niners would be pick 30. That's pick 30. So it's not hurt a little more if it was picked at 10. Every team in the league, if you needed a coach, would trade pick 30 for Sean Payton, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that crazy. And the second round pick is the following year. So the trade maybe isn't as crazy as once you start talking it out. Because the way we talk about it, for all first round picks aren't equal, right?
The ninth, well, no, like the pick that like the Saints would happily swap the pick they just got.
Well, if I tell you, hey, guy,
for the one they sent to Philly,
I totaled my car today. You'd be like, "Oh shit, are you okay?" I'd be like, "I'm completely fine." You're like, "How's the car?" It's like, "It's done." Well, if I told you it was, 1987 Pinto, worth nothing. You'd be like, no
Always
big
a
deal.
Pinto.
I saw yesterday or a couple days ago, right here in the parking lot, there was a Lamborghini. The guy was walking by who I kind of got to know. I'm like, how much do you think this thing's worth? And he kind of looked at it. I knew he was a car guy. I guess about $500,000.
Oh, it's not his car.
No, it's not his car, but we were kind of looking at it, and I could tell he kind of knew his cars. And if I told you I totaled the Lamborghini, it'd be a different reaction, right? So, I don't know, man. I just think that we don't discuss that with first round picks unless it's like the top 5 pick. It's just first rounder. We just 3 first rounders for Trey Lance, but we never specify like, well, actually one was picked this, one was picked that. It's just 3 first rounders. Sean Payton got traded for a first rounder. John Gruden got traded for a first rounder. Well, Gruden won the Super Bowl, so the following year's first rounder had to be near the end, right? If you suck like the first rounder that Seattle gets from Denver this year, it feels pretty good.
Or that Philly gets from the Saints.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
What I love about this move is much like Gruden to the Raiders, maybe even more so than Gruden to the Raiders, because Russ is already there. There is just a really high implosion factor here for the Broncos, right? Like sometimes if something fails, it's not interesting. Denver is interesting no matter what it looks like. And with Sean Payton, it's now that 10x or 5x or whatever, 2x. Russ was already fascinating. Now with Sean Payton, it's interesting. Sean Payton is established. He's a very good coach. It's a complicated situation in a stacked division, right? Every team in the division now has an extremely high-profile quarterback or an extremely high-profile coach, or both. Like Kansas City has both. Denver now has both. I'd say the Chargers have a high-profile quarterback, and Staley's a high profile, but he's not Sean Payton or Andy Reid, tier 1 profile. And obviously the Raiders.
In the polarizing, though, where everyone talks about him.
He is polarizing. And then Josh McDaniels, very polarizing.
Yeah. And listen, when you live, when I lived in Philadelphia, when the team would be on the road and I'd be at home, like the games we get on the Eastern Seaboard are a lot different than the ones we get here on the West Coast. I feel like just regular CBS game in the afternoon window, half the year I get a Denver game. Feels 6 to 8 times a year. It's just on my local television feed.
Yeah.
Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
And it's been like that my whole life. Yeah. And when they're good or competitive, they immediately they get treated kind of like a high profile brand, right? Because they are one.
Yeah, they are. They're not a tier 1 NFL brand, but I would say they're tier 2.
They got until
you were good in the 90s, it feels like you're just like at least at minimum tier 2.
Good point. Do you think that's when the fan bases were really kind of exponentially grew?
Well, it's when the Fox TV deals it's like where all the TV money really blew up, and the NFL went from, not that it was mom and pop before, but the NFL became the big business that it is today in the 90s. Good point. The television distribution became humongous. And I would guess if we check the ratings have been big, but as we went, because cable came along and it was no longer just you're going to get the biggest ratings because there's only 3 channels, right? Which is why these games rated in the 70s. But in the 90s, things started to segment a little bit, cable and dish and all that stuff. And that's when the big TV deals came along. And the NFL really grew because they got big influxes of money in the 90s.
It feels like Monday Night Football has been going on for a long time. But Monday Night Football in my youth, I feel like I saw a lot of Chiefs, a lot of Broncos. I still a lot of AFC West. And it makes sense, right? They had Marty. Those teams in Kansas City were really good. And John Elway was the quarterback for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
I envision seeing a lot of Monday Night Football Denver Bronco games as a kid. Like 3 or 4 a year, it feels like.
Yeah.
Which matters, right? And think about it. From 1984 till 1997, they had, I bet pretty early in John Elway's career, he's one of the most famous athletes in America.
I think he was I think right away, right? Because he famously, like, I'm not playing for this team. I'm not playing for that team. His dad he'd been at Stanford. They weren't any good, but he'd been drafted by the Yankees, big time draft.
You're right. He did the "I'm not playing for you" thing. So that immediately. Back then, that was
Mel Kiper.
That was a viral move. That's a viral move.
Mel was pissed. Chargers have Kellen Moore as well. Yeah. One of the stories has been that where if Sean Payton landed somewhere, that Vic Fangio would go there with him. But Sean Payton landed at a place where Vic was just fired as the head coach. There were several reports that Vic was going to the Dolphins a couple of days ago, but nothing has transpired yet. On Monday, Mike Silver wrote, "For what it's worth, Vic Fangio told me last night nothing's been decided." Silver said there is a huge amount of mutual respect between Kyle Shanahan and Fangio. It appears the Niners will have an opening soon, which they now do. Vic clearly has a good relationship with the 49ers organization. He's been around a ton. I think there was some sense the last two times Kyle needed like when Kyle got the job, there was the possibility that Vic would be a DC, but then I think Vic shortly thereafter or at the same time, I don't remember the exact timeline, became the Broncos head coach. Feels like that was shortly thereafter, but that was part of that timeline. Was Vic kind of felt like a natural Niners DC, but then he got a head coaching job. And then it's like you had D'Amico, so Vic wasn't going to get the job that time. Chris Wilkes, the Niners have reportedly requested. Steve Wilkes, thank you. Chris Harris, who just looks badass, football team DB coach, played in the league for 8 years. Great headshot. For those of you listening, go to his wiki and go to his Commanders team photo. It's fantastic.
Why does Del Rio always a part of staffs that are just like they're the staff that could beat up all the other staffs?
Because that Del Rio number one quality alpha, only alphas only.
I mean,
so Blake on the stream says losing D'Amico hurt so bad. The best DC under Kyle. Where do we go from here? I don't think we have anyone on the staff at this moment that can step up in this role. And Severo says both Shanahan and Fangio seem grumpy. They'd make a great pair. Now, there is the issue of he has historically run a different defense than the 49ers have.
Fangio can be grumpy. From people that like literally with him, that worked with him in Chicago, I just think he's one thing
I don't think Kyle cares about that, right? Kyle
no.
Other coaches might be like, he offends me. I'm in charge.
No, because one thing you would say about Saul and D'Amico, they are upbeat, optimistic, glass half full guys. One thing I heard about Vic is he's really good with players. One thing that was an issue with him in Denver that he didn't have to ever deal with when he was in Chicago was, it's the defensive mindset. You can be grumpy if you're really good and also know what you're doing. But with the offense and quarterbacks, it can be difficult. And that was a downfall of his, which he's just a number two and there's nothing wrong. I think there's two ways to look at it. If you go with the simple philosophical belief, assuming that Cassera can coach with them because they coach schematically completely different things. If you think it's going to be no issue and it'd work and they think that would be fine. We know each other. We're buddies or we can be buddies. It's a big picture move. You're getting the best guy on the market because he is the best defensive coordinator on the market, not debatable. But scheme does matter. And it might take a little time because what I've heard, I have a very close friend that worked with him in Chicago. He said, it is stupid how good this guy is. Like he's a master. Like the way we talk about Kyle or Andy or even Sean Payton, like with scheme and how much they know their scheme. It's like, this guy's a football fucking genius. And the best players on his team have had the best years when he's been their coordinator. Time in and time out. But it's completely different than you're with the Niners. And the one thing I think the pushback would be, if I was just on the outside looking in, do you want to risk a potential just transitional period, even if you have a lot of players that feel like could easily make the transition, but could take a step back in a year where you're kind of ready to win?
Well, I would say two things. One,
because I would imagine over the last month, it's been pretty clear throughout the season he was going to get a job, but like over the last month, Kyle knows he's gone. You've probably had these, like him and John have had these deep philosophical talks, like, 4-3, 3-4. And he's probably been ongoing because the Vic thing, but it's a pretty big risk, even if you're getting the best guy on the market, given how good you've been running this specific defense now, right?
Yeah, and given that you have, like, I can see the first press conference after we've watched Nick Bosa drop into coverage 7 times, and people are like, why are we doing this? Is this really the best thing to do? Right?
He is pretty good with his pass rushers, though, right? Khalil, Alden,
Thing, like, Vic's been around the Niners a lot. I would imagine he doesn't just drop in, watch practice, and then leave without having a conversation with anybody, right? Whether it be Mike Shanahan or Chris Kasarik or Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch or some Adam Peters, somebody, Jed York, about like what might it look like, and is it a guarantee that if the Niners hired Vic Fangio that they would switch to his historic defensive philosophy? Because like when Kyle Shanahan, who many people say is one of the best offensive minds in the game, and that everybody understands has a very specific system that he runs, when he has been in a situation where his quarterback doesn't do exactly what he generally does with RG3 in Washington and with Trey Lance at the beginning of this year, he changed what he does a little bit. He adjusted a little bit of what he does. So if Vic is every bit what your buddy says he is, like one of the great defensive minds, well, who's to say that he couldn't say, you know what? I will adapt to what you guys do. I think he's watched a lot of these practices, John. If there's any part of him that thinks he can meld what he's done with what Chris Kasarik does and what these guys do best, adapt to his personnel. Wouldn't you say that's what the best coaches do? Adapt to their personnel. So,
well, the Patriots have been a consistent, fantastic defense for 23 years now, right? What's the New England Patriots defense, right?
Changes every week.
They don't have one.
Yeah.
Vic historically has been in a base 3-4
defense.
defense, and I think that's where the base 3-4 defense. Now, I think the modern day coach would be like, well, most teams come out in 3 wide receivers now. So you're just naturally immediately in a nickel situation where you have another DB and you take one of those pass rushers or defensive linemen, you morph immediately.
Could you?
I think depending on what teams you play, some teams are in 80% of the time. I think the league average was, I'm pretty sure I heard recently, high 60s, that you're in 3 receiver sets, which means you're in a nickel defense. Which
I can already hear the Kyle Shanahan press conference after they've hired Vic Fangio, and people are peppering him with questions about how is this going to work, and Kyle acts like they're the stupidest questions he's heard. Right?
If you think I'm going to fucking apologize for Croft blocking Hassan Reddick, you got another thing coming.
We did not have all the information. Of course, we can all say now I should have thrown the challenge flag, but Fox did not give me a good replay. But I can already hear it, and I'm not even mocking it. Like I can see Kyle Stanley going, wait a second. So I shouldn't have hired the best coordinator on the market because of what he's done historically? Vic's a really good coach. We got really good players. That's going to work, right? I can see Kyle explaining that in an in-depth way of how they're going to make it work. And I'd be willing to risk that. I'd be willing to say, let's see if Vic Fangio can work with Eric Armstead, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Emmanuel Mosley, maybe Mooney Ward, Nick Bosa, and Eric Armstead. I say Armstead, Nick Bosa, right? Like, let's just give it a shot. Let's take some of the best defensive players in the league and put them with the best defensive coach in the league and see if this bad boy can work with Chris.
And Vic,
Kasarik.
If you want to coach Kinlaw, who actually in theory should work in your scheme, don't watch the Eagle game. If you want us to cut Kinlaw, because that's what you will tell me to do, throw on the Eagle game.
Yeah. Or any of the other games.
Yeah, I'd say that one, it started off and looked like Grant was going to lose the battle. I'd say it aged, some of his comments didn't quite age as strong as the season went on.
Kinlaw did get on the field. That part, he did get on the field consistently. But
if you just look at it from a simple perspective, hire the best guy. You can't justify. There is not a football coach in America that would rather have Steve Wilkes or this, defensive back coach over Vic Fangio. It's not debatable. Now, if you factor in, like, if Kyle's like, I really want to run a 4-3 defense, or exactly what we've been doing up the field, wide 9, and Vic's like, that's not, I don't feel as comfortable, whatever, then yeah, I get it. But I think that.
But how if you're Vic?
I think Vic Fangio will be the defensive coordinator for the 49ers.
Well, there's been smoke around that hire for several years. It just hasn't lined up. Right?
It's lined up now.
It's lined up now. And if you're Vic and you have the choice of Denver, good defensive players, good head coach.
Is that Miami, a choice, though? Does any coach ever go back to where he's been the head coach that recently to be a position coach?
I heard Papa today say, what was the guy? The Chiefs guy, Gunther? Not Paul Gunther.
Yeah, Gunther Cunningham.
Gunther Cunningham. I guess he was close with the Hunt family. Just because you asked, only Greg would know. And then Miami has good defensive players, right? Good team. But Vic's been just hanging around the Niners for a long time. He's just been hanging around the Niners a long time.
Pretty clearly Howie put him on the payroll because they knew they might lose their defensive coordinator and they wanted the opportunity, I'm sure. Like, he didn't just randomly put him on the payroll, right?
Yeah.
I would be – it doesn't feel like Gannon's going to get a job because he's not going to Texas. He's not going to Denver. Indy's taken. Or excuse me, Carolina's taken. It doesn't feel like he's in the mix at Indy. I guess his only spot would be Arizona, that guy will just be back. Because if you told me that Gannon had taken one of these jobs, I'd be like, well, I imagine the Eagles are trying to get him too, right?
Yeah. Don't forget the point you made to me when we were texting about it the other day. Jed's chance to stick it back to Stephen Ross for the political battle that Stephen Ross won in local Santa Clara government by funding some project. So.
Also a way Fangio ends up getting more money, I would guess. Jed would have to pay him like $5.5 million a year than what he would have made if he, who Tom Sula got the job over him, the Tom Sula at the time probably made like $3.5 million. So ultimately he gets.
You think it was 3.5? You don't think it was like 2.5? It was 3.5?
2014. Yeah. I mean, Pat Hill, when I was at Fresno State in like 2009, was making $2 million.
Yeah.
But whatever it was the lowest. But it was, he's going to get Jed back. Which I don't give Jed necessarily credit, but the Niners have done a good job of just not making it weird. Because sometimes in sports, when you have a crazy breakup, there is no coming back, right? Honestly, shocked Papa and Kyle Shanahan can even talk after what happened in 1991 with Mike Shanahan and Al Davis 75 years ago.
Yeah, well,
Raiders are a good example there. Once you were out, right?
Yes, the Raiders did not have the door only swung one way.
Yeah. Even Harbaugh made a comeback this year, which was interesting.
Which Harbaugh?
Remember Jim when he showed up at the anniversary?
Oh, yeah, with like 7 other people?
I think like 13.
I think it was 9.
It was missing a lot of people, yeah.
I think it was 9 people. And Jim showed up just...
It's, we're going to have a
guy you invite praying they say no. And then like, I'll love to be there.
We're going to have a team reunion for the team that won the division and lost in the conference championship. It was a little weird. Felt forced. But maybe that was the 12 team, huh?
It was the 12 team. It was the 10-year anniversary of the 12 team. Yeah. Yeah.
No chance. Can't afford us.
There was one other story I was going to sneak in here. I don't know. All right, we'll be on Fangio watch. It would feel like a win of an off-season move. I do think fundamentally, whoever Kyle picks, the one thing that gives you some confidence with their defensive coordinator is that Kyle knows offense very well, and I think because of it, he knows defense really well. I think he knows who. Now I don't know how much Steve Wilkes he's coached against. Certainly Chris Harris, but Washington's defense was good. He's got a good feel for leadership. Like we'd say, he's 2 for 2 on hiring defensive coordinators. So,
one major difference between Kyle, Sean McVay, and LaFleur, like everyone thinks LaFleur's defenses suck year in and year out. Sean McVay, Wade Phillips, one and done Brandon Staley, and then Raheem Morris wins the Super Bowl, and their defense was awesome. And Kyle's 2 for 2 now. Like both those two guys clearly have a pretty good feel of what good defenses look like, and it's the reason. Obviously, this year was a terrible year for the Rams, but even the Niners that had a bad year in 20, their defenses always feel like they're solid. They value for being offensive play callers. I really value guys that are offensive play callers, and all they care about is the offensive scheme and like the team, but they really care about their defensive unit.
Yeah. Like
Andy would just be like, go buy some sweet players, and I'll just pay a shitload for a defensive coach, and you just run it. Like I do. Kyle, he's got cameras in their offices. I feel like McVay does that too. Like they're always kind of watching.
You are set up for success also if you become the Niners defensive coordinator, given the players they have, right? You would think it's kind of a high floor.
Well, I don't know if Fangio is like too caught up. Like someone's going to pay him a lot of money and he'll go wherever. I do think if I was one of these young coaches, like that DB coach for Washington, who maybe he's just now in the mix of some of these jobs, I would be all over this. I'd be like, Kyle, I will fucking take that job, man. You guys don't have to pay me as much. Like, I will be there yesterday. What do you need
honestly,
me to do?
if he gets the chance, you know what Kyle should do?
Could that guy play? Could that guy play
like
defensive tackle /
what's
linebacker?
What's the neck size that's big? Because that's a.
What do you think the Commanders' 6 a.m. Coaching workout looks like? You know, when they're in the gym in the morning.
You can't take anybody's coach unless you make them the coordinator, right? Because ideally you get Vic. Although Vic, you know, the thing that Vic would also bring, he's not about to go become somebody else's head coach in all likelihood. Like, you're not losing Vic Fangio in 2 years. He's not getting another head coaching job.
Well, that's the safest part about it. The big picture. And I think I was telling someone this, maybe you, one thing Andy has in Spags is like, where's Spags going? It's as good as it gets. Like, this is Spags. He could have Spags for like 8 straight years. Kyle could have Vic Fangio probably till he retired. If you hired, the Steve Wilkes, hell, if you hired the UC Davis Denver Bronco guy, that guy could be a head coach next year, right?
I don't know if Wilkes would be, but Evero for sure.
I would say Wilkes, like, what if their defense was just number 1 again? And it's like he was almost a job. He at least could be interviewing for jobs.
Yeah, he could be. I mean, he has not failed. Like, 1 year in Arizona, which is a mess anyway, and then won games, relatively speaking. Carolina won more games when he became the coach. I'm Elliot says Damon Bruce gave you some love the other day. D. Bruce has always supported the ham operation, so we appreciate that. We are contractually obligated to talk shit when not about D. Bruce, but about radio when somebody asks.
Yeah,
it's just.
I mean, I can like the people there and think the medium is, you know,
we
make fun of the operation.
Got run out of town, John. We got run out of the building.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to do about it, huh? 1 minute you're interviewing Darren. No, not Darren McFadden. Who was it? Who's the interview on the last day of the show?
MJD?
No, not MJD. Had canceled. That had been canceled.
Marcel Reese?
Was it Marcel Reese? Could have been Marcel Reese. I felt like it was a Raiders running back, not Marcel Reese.
I couldn't even tell you.
Mark Bedane, was that the interview that day?
You could also leave a place, get forced out.
Latavius Murray, that's what it was. We interviewed Latavius Murray on the last show.
Your life would be infinitely better. Money is dramatically more, and still just like, I'm going to talk shit till I die. I mean, it's in fun now. It's like I don't care, but the shit talking doesn't end about, God, I can't imagine being there.
Yana Vander says, hypothetically, what would it take to get Jay Bosa?
It's not possible.
Yeah, only if they were deeply offended that he was in a Niners jacket could that even happen. You want to go to the QB situation or Darius Slay? Kittle.
Well, I don't know. I think the Darius Slay thing we can hammer out fast.
Okay, so did you see Kittle's initial comments? Did you notice them initially?
I'm not unless it's an outrageous comment, I don't really care. I'm not locked into, I don't watch player press conferences during the week. Beside the quarterback, maybe.
In the week leading up to the NFC Championship game, George Kittle said, when you look on paper, you say, yeah, you should be able to match physicality and things like that. Then you go on the field Sundays in the film, and after the game, we'll show you exactly what you're asking. But I know we're going to come out and be violent and physical. I'm expecting them to be the same. We'll see. Then he broke into a huge grin. He also said, we'll see on Sunday, won't we? I mean, they've got 6 first-round picks on the D-line. They have physical guys in the secondary, physical guys at linebacker. Whatever you see on paper, sure. So then Darius Slay, who has a podcast / YouTube on the Volume, you sent me the clip today, said basically that the Eagles took notice of those quotes. Like, he wasn't pissed about it. I didn't think he was like shit talking, but he just said matter-of-factly the stuff that Kittle said, like, we knew what it meant. He was saying we're good on paper, that we're not actually maybe as physical as some of the numbers might make you think. Did I summarize Slay's comments?
I think, yeah. And, I have no problem. In an individual sport, when you're an elite player, you can say whatever you want because you get to individually impact everything. And George Kittle, as an individual, he could have said, fuck these guys. They ain't going to do shit to me. And he'd be right. Like he can handle himself, just like Trent, Fred, Nick, Debo. They can say whatever they want in a vacuum because they can handle themselves. No different than Kelsey or, Fletcher Cox or Hassan Reddick, Darius Slay, Richard Sherman, whatever. But it is a team game. It's a team game. And there are guys specifically on Kittle's unit, the offense, who are at a major disadvantage against the Eagles' specific unit, the defensive line. Burford, a fourth-round rookie, gets subbed out throughout the game, throughout this entire season. That is not normal. And McGlinchey is an average tackle at best. I don't give a shit at what PFF says. In a passing situation where they know he's passing against an elite speed rusher, it is game on for the speed rusher. And obviously, I didn't envision Croft having to block someone. I put that more on Kyle. But still, if you put him in the game, I bet the Eagles are like, we're going after this guy. So when Kittle, who it's not a double middle finger to these guys, but he said it kind of knowing what he was saying to a team that does have a lot of talented players. And in the NFC Championship game, I put this out on Twitter, like, well, you really think that they're going to try harder? It's not about trying harder. Everyone tries hard. People try hard in preseason games. This is football. This isn't fucking Adam Silver's league. You try hard every snap for the most part, unless you're down 30 points. It's in high school, college, or the pros. It's about like during the week, this is one of those where what if their focus was just an extra 1%? The message of everything the defensive coordinator was just that extra percent. There's a reason the greatest coach in the history of football doesn't allow his players to say anything. And that's when they're playing shitty teams or in the Super Bowl. Because what do you get out of it? There is no positive, right? You're not going to like get over on them. There were two teams this week, guy, that talked a lot of shit. Two teams. They both lost. Is that the reason they lost? Of course not. But think about this with the 49ers. George, who again can back it up. He's an elite player. Even in the clip, Slay's like, yeah, I think Kittle's one of the best tight ends in the league. He's a badass. He ain't talking about George or Debo or Trent. He knows that those guys are fine. It's about going after the mark. Like, fuck McGlinchey. Fuck Burford. And when we're saying that in the meeting, like those guys are the mark because they are the mark, it gets extra focus. And what happened? Both quarterbacks got KO'd. And you can say, oh, it's freak deal, MIDDLEKAUFF, because that's what some guys on Twitter, freak deal. That's literally what happened. Both quarterbacks.
What's the freak deal? The injury?
Yeah, like that he got taken out.
Oh.
One guy literally got KO'd and the other guy got destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, the question would just be, what do we gain out of this?
Whatever, it's not debatable that it was unnecessary. It's like, do you really think? I don't really think anything. The Eagles are literally telling you, they're literally telling you that this was a big deal, and not the team, in the defense. And the defense is going up against not just Debo, not just Ayuk, not just Trent. There are other guys on the team that aren't as good and that are the Niners. What is the Niners' liability on the entire team? It's like, yeah, defensive back, the safety, speed, maybe, and like the right side of the offensive line. And if you tell me Croft is ever in blocking, that is an immediate red flag.
Yeah, look, it is impossible to quantify how a team uses that, right? Maybe they're a little more together. Like you said, are they really going to play a little harder? But here's what I know. Both teams said after the game or reacted after the game like it mattered to them, because it did. From what Slay said, there was also a quote from Brandon Graham, and he said it the same thing. He's like, we took umbrage to it. The
way George says it is a slight to them.
100%. But this is the simplest. Like, people might want to debate, like you said, like, John, how do you know they played harder? How about this? This to me is the only argument. How does it benefit? Do we benefit from it? You know the saying, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. If you're standing still, right? Like, look at it like food. Everything, if you're some people are really hypersensitive about what they put in their body. And they would argue like I'm not one of them. It's like everything you put in is either a positive or a negative. So if you put something in your body that you think is a net neutral, somebody else who's super psycho about it would be like, if it's not a positive, I'm not ingesting it. And that would be the basic argument. How does it help you win the game? That's what Belichick would say. How does this help us? Does this help us? Because you couldn't argue yes to that. Unless you're like, oh no, I'm gonna get in their dome. They're gonna do some dumb shit. They're gonna get some penalties, trying to prove that they're tough. Right? Like if you're like, okay, maybe you could build that theory and maybe I could even buy it. But by and large, you'd say, what is the point of Mike Hilton saying it's Burrowhead at Gayha Field? What is the point of that? Why? What do we gain? By the way, not only did he call it Burrowhead, Arrowhead, he then did he went on, I think because he said it, he was like CBS's pregame interview, like in the hallway, like interviewing Mike Hilton. I'm like, why are they interviewing Mike Hilton?
Oh my God, I didn't understand that. I wasn't like, I must have missed when
there's no way they interviewing him if he's not the one that said that, right?
That makes sense. I was like, why are they talking to this guy?
There's no other reason. Like he just was a story that week. So are you saying Kyle Shanahan should tell George Kittle, we don't, from here on out, no trash talk?
To me, there's a difference of trash talk of like, I don't think they can cover me. I don't think you have to be Belichick where you're never allowed to say anything, but he kind of put it on everyone else. He wrote checks that his whole team can't cash. Debo can, Trent can, Juszczyk can, McCaffrey can. Most of their guys can. Their entire defense can hang, but this is a result-oriented business. It's black and white. You win or you lose. Quarterbacks either make it through the game or they don't. Two of them got knocked out of the game. One literally got KO'd. The other guy got his arm for 6 months fucking ruined. Like that happened. And both hits came from the right side of the line where the Niners were already at a disadvantage. So why ever? Like it's unneeded. Not against the best team you're playing all season. Like I think when you look back, you go, that was dumb. How's that even debatable? The Eagles, like, John, why do you think the Eagles are telling you this? They're the team that fucking ruined your two quarterbacks. We all witnessed it. It was the most embarrassing thing we've ever seen, what we had to watch, because they could not throw. Because both quarterbacks, Jerry Rice tweeted, in my 20 years of playing in the league, I've never seen this. Jerry Rice played till he was like 45 fucking years old. You've never seen this. No one has. It's unthinkable. It's unimaginable what we just witnessed. And they both came from the right side of the offensive line. So is it like, I'm not putting this on George Kittle. I'm not putting the loss on George Kittle. But you can say that was a dumb idea for him to say anything. It was unneeded. You could argue going into a championship game, a playoff game in general, any big game, what's the point?
Why help? It's not just about effort. It's about unification, right? You always hear guys talk about it. You play for one another. You play together. You say something critical, it can unify people. It's just, you just turn everybody's dial up a hair.
Well, I'd say this, George. Without anything being said, just everyone is super focused on each other. You guys have a disadvantage at a specific spot on your offense. Your ability to block the right side of their defensive line, technically the left side of their defensive line, your right side of the offensive line, especially if you're not around to help out those two guys. You are in trouble. And if I change you out for your backup, holy Jesus. We would say in general, if I say, Guy, there are going to be some rushes today in passing situations where Croft, McGlinchey, and Burford are going to be up against Reddick and Hargraves. You'd be like, that could lead to a disaster. It might be a fumble 6 or a sack. But worst case scenario is guys get hurt, right? Because they don't get touched. And that's what happened. Olay blocks. And McGlinchey was getting smoked. He's just not good enough. So you're just already at a disadvantage. You have a player in a key spot against one of the best players in the league who just isn't good enough. So you're already at a disadvantage. It's just when they're saying it, it's not debatable that it was unneeded and not smart to do. They're telling you, the team that they're telling you that. It's like, well, our quarterbacks got knocked out. Well, no fucking shit.
Defense gets credit when they knock your quarterback out. They get credit for that. They hit the guy and he got hurt. Joe Thomas and Mitchell Schwartz, both Shanahan guys, don't think that it's fair to criticize Kyle for putting Croft one-on-one with Hassan Reddick because that's just, you have to just commit yourself to the offense. I texted Jeff Schwartz. I called Jeff Schwartz. He's like, nah, I don't buy that. Like, I think you can adjust for a given game. Then I texted somebody who I know initially through you, who was a NFL offensive coach. He agreed with Joe Thomas and Mitchell Schwartz that, like, yeah, you can't. But then he went on to tell me about all the times that they adjusted their blocking scheme for Khalil Mack. So, like, again, Joe Thomas and Mitchell Schwartz, big time. These guys know what the fuck they're talking about. I just can't accept an explanation that says, yes, putting Tyler Kroft one-on-one with Hassan Reddick is an acceptable part of the game plan. On a 7-step drop play action play.
Well, here's the other thing. George is one of the heartbeats of the team. He's one of the best players, not just on the team, but in the league. Jason Kelce is the same thing for the Eagles. I watched his press conference, and of course, he's going to have his own thoughts about certain guys. Like, you think I can't block Kinlaw? But he's not going to talk like that. He even brought up, leading up to the week, like his press conference on Wednesday or Thursday, that last week, I guess one thing Brandon Graham does is kind of like pregame. He's like, the way he gets him psyched up is he'll just start screaming at the other team, and sometimes in warmups and stuff. And against the Giants, he's like, he's screaming at Dexter Lawrence. I'm like, Brandon, shut up, man. You don't have to deal with this guy. I do. And the one thing in football, I'd say football, basketball, it is like you don't control everything. Some of your teammates, like,
right. It's not basketball where it's like I talk shit to you and then I push somebody out of the way and I come guard you.
Yeah, it's not the way it works. Again, I'm not saying cut the guy. I'm not saying like he should be suspended. I'm just saying like it wasn't smart. And the Eagles literally told you how they feel about it. Like I didn't make this up. The only reason it hit me is because they said it. I mean, they're the ones telling you. The Chiefs told you too. Now the Chiefs thing, it was like very outspoken. It's not on that level, right? He wasn't calling him Burrowhead, but it wasn't subtle enough, One thing the Niners will do, because they got really good players. Bosa does this every once in a while too. But I would say the difference with Bosa is basically every guy on his defense can handle it. Turns out Kinlaw can't, but the other guy, like, they all can pick up for themselves. Like, the Niners have on offense a major liability in pass protection, right?
What did he say? 6 first-round picks on the D line. Is that what he said?
Yeah, I mean, they signed Sue in the middle of the season.
Yeah, but he wasn't talking about. He didn't single out the safeties. He didn't single out the linebackers. He singled out the position group that those guys were going to go.
Did you watch Kittle after the game?
Yeah.
When he talked about, like, I'm always going to hit someone in the face, it felt like he kind of knew, like, I talked some shit. I handled myself. It's like, George, it was never about you. Like, you're always going to be able to handle yourself until you're old and shot or whatever. Like, right now, in the peak of your powers, in the prime of your career, you're an elite top 50 player in the league. Like, yeah, no one's worried about you hitting guys in the face. Like, we all seen the clips. Other guys, they were hitting guys in the face and embarrassing, like, all over the internet, And literally, the worst case scenario, quarterbacks got injured because guys went untouched, right? And that's the worst case possible in the sport. Guys going untouched, uninhibited to the quarterback, injuring
unabated, unmolested, to the quarterback.
You go unmolested to the quarterback, and you're a really good player. Like, if I say Armstead, Bosa, Myles Garrett, Hassan Reddick don't get touched, Aaron Donald, and they get like a 5 or 6 step head start, like they're not just going to tap the quarterback. Like, the way they hit them might lead to an injury.
Live for that shit.
Fuck yeah, because they don't get to do it ever.
I heard a broadcaster use unmolested the other day, and I'm like, I know technically by the dictionary definition, you're right, but
why are they getting asked to use that word, by a friend?
Could be somebody paid him $20. It's just that word. You just can't use that word the way it's intended.
Was that Robert Griffin III?
No, it was not Robert. It was a play-by-play guy. I honestly don't remember who. All right, let's talk about Brock and Tom and Trey. Here we go again. Although I guess last year we didn't talk about Brock. We'll start with what Brock Purdy said. He met the media at his locker today. An update on his health. He's actually getting, he said, another test done on Tuesday, so there'll probably be some more news on that at the end of the week. But I think, we did an emergency pod on Monday about the UCL injury, which was the report. So if you missed that, there's the video and there's the podcast of that. doing some more research on what a UCL injury is and the difference between a repair and a reconstruction. It is in both cases the tendon on the inside of the elbow. And what Purdy said on Tuesday was that it went numb immediately when he got hit. And then over the course of the game, when he started to throw, it immediately really hurt. And in fact, it actually really hurt him even when he just handed off. It hurts him when he moves his arm. So it's significant pain. What we don't know, what was not reported, is the degree to which his elbow is torn. Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, etc. I would say, not being a doctor, I'm optimistic that he's not going to need Tommy John surgery, which is reconstructive, and that if he needs surgery, which it sounds like he will, he would just need what people have been calling a repair. The difference, as I understand it, is that the reconstruction tends to occur. Jake Delhomme needed UCL reconstruction. He had Tommy John. Big Ben had Tommy John. Pitchers have Tommy John. But when Delhomme hurt his elbow, just like when Big Ben hurt his elbow, it was throwing the ball, meaning that the tear in the elbow was an overuse injury.
Which is how it happens to pitchers too, correct?
Which is how it happens to pitchers from over and over. That's not what happened to Brock. Brock's arm got pulled back and the tendon got snapped. And the difference between a repair and a reconstruction depends on the quality of the tendons available. So if the tendons were clean snapped, in theory, like happened to Brock, then it's easier to, I don't know if this is exactly how it works, sew them back together. When it's an overuse injury, the tendons are frayed. And that's when they have to, in the case of Delhomme, they took a tendon from, a reconstruction means they take a tendon from somewhere else in your body or from a cadaver, and they attach that to your existing tendon. So it has to take, which is why the rehab process is longer. When it's your own, when they're just sewing back what's already there because the tendons are not frayed, they're good quality tendons, then the recovery time is shorter. That said,
man, your arm's a lot stronger. Yeah. Bill from Texas died, 50 years old, died from cancer. Big time baseball player in high school, just a little stronger.
We took his ACL, we put it in there. Man, he was fast. Delhomme actually said, despite the full reconstruction, his elbow recovery, he was throwing a Nerf football within 4 months, and Delhomme was cleared to play in 7 months. And his quote, I read this article from 2019 that was about Big Ben. Delhomme actually said he felt so much better after he snapped his elbow because he was experiencing a lot of elbow pain. I think Ben was also. He had a lot of elbow pain because his arm was about to blow.
Yeah. It's like when guys start feeling the sore Achilles and then it pops, within a year.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not what was going on with Brock. So Delhomme said it was a relief, like physically a pain relief when his elbow snapped and he came back better. And Delhomme eventually came out. Delhomme had a hip injury. His elbow ended up being fine the rest of his career. So I'm pretty optimistic about Brock from a UCL standpoint. And the other reason, hearing him talk, if you watch him, one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he actually said it pretty eloquently, was that, through being the last pick of the draft and having kind of this, even though the timeline wasn't long, he was a long shot to become an NFL quarterback. And he's always said that he's kept an even mind. His family keeps him grounded. His faith in God keeps him grounded. And what he said today, Tuesday, was, I'm excited. This is going to be a test to see if I can be everything I say that I've been. And he didn't say it in some braggy way. He didn't say it in some bullshit. I thought it was just a really interesting perspective for a young guy. Like, I say that I stay grounded and I stay positive and I stay in the moment and I keep an even keel and all that stuff because of my family and because of me and God and all that. Well, now I'm going to put to the test, like, basically, can I be everything that I say that I am? That it was a really impressive, I thought, kind of performance by Brock today.
Well, I think one thing on a positive note it lets him do is definitely get a little stronger. I just think from a workout standpoint, a rehab standpoint, just maybe put on a little, I guess some of his upper body. He won't be able to lift as hard, but it does just feel maybe he can just fill out a little bit in his time rehabbing and lifting because he won't be able to play football. Now, maybe he won't be able to do as much as I'm saying because he doesn't, you can't push the arm, but he's not a guy that really needs the mental reps. You'd say clearly he had a pretty good understanding of mentally what he was doing immediately. I'm not saying that that doesn't hurt, or I mean, it wouldn't help to get reps in the off season, but never ideal when you have to miss practice. But also on the bright side is that, the other quarterback that, I guess he essentially Wally pipped is going to get all the reps, and he needs the reps, and he just wouldn't get the same amount of reps if they were both healthy. Like Brock would get more. Brock would just run with the ones, and Trey would run with the twos, assuming those are the two quarterbacks. But I always get a little unsure with timelines. Every guy's a little different. So it's just, some guys, if you told me it was 4 months, if you told me it was 8 months, who knows, Maybe on the bright side is that his he was completely fine before, right? It was a freak injury, not some wear and tear, like a tire. It's one thing if a tire just pops, like you can patch it up, right? Or replace the tire. It's different than an elbow injury, obviously. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes you can see the tread on a tire going down and all of a sudden it rips. That wasn't the case with his elbow, right?
Yeah. Yep. It was not, remember the preseason Matthew Stafford's elbow was sore. Remember that story?
And there's a chance his elbow's never the same.
That it might need to be, even if it hasn't. That's where it's tough, right? Is what if your elbow isn't injured enough to the point that you need surgery, but it's just the only way to ever be pain-free again is to get surgery.
Yeah.
But no one gets preemptive Tommy
Well,
John.
no one's like, yeah, just cut my Achilles and then give me a new one. You would never do that.
Let's go bionic. Yeah. So anyway, that's the latest with Brock. I'm sure there'll be more news on that. I think the other thing you have to consider is the Niners now for 2 years have had surgery situations that have not really been all that straightforward. Now, Jimmy's surgery was not straightforward because him and his agent were kind of also playing a game, trying to force a release, that type of thing. But Trey's situation was not straightforward. Trey got hurt. Trey got surgery. Trey then needed a second surgery. So, and you said this immediately on Sunday, whatever the timeline is, you still, if you're the one getting the surgery, you don't wake up and go, 6 months from now, I'll be ready to roll. Like it takes 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. You're getting regular checkups. You're checking on the thing. Did the surgery work? Did your body react the way they wanted it to? So
think about this. Trey said today he's going to be cleared, he thinks, in about 4 weeks. So by the time OTA start, how long has that been? Right? You're talking basically half of September, October, November, December, January. I mean, you're talking 6 months.
Yeah.
With his shattered ankle, and when you say cleared, like, would he be full go at practice? So he's probably another 2 months. That's a 7-8 month. Now he had his ankle shattered, but these timelines, they're a fluid situation. It's easy to say 4 weeks now. Nothing's going on in 4 weeks, right? If they actually had practice in the middle of March, would he be able to run around?
Yeah.
Potentially. We've seen a lot of guys come back for the Niners. They're on the sideline. You and I have been to enough practices. He's cleared. We're taking it easy. We're just easing him in. And that's the right way to handle it, right? These guys are coming off Trey, a major leg injury. And I'd say specifically with him throwing, you don't want another rip. You don't want to have to go back in. Like, you want this thing to hold. I would say they would be extra cautious with his elbow coming back.
Yeah.
So whatever the month is, like after the surgery happens, whatever is released by the team, like we expect 5 months, I would add a month.
He's throwing, but it's only 10, no throws of over 10 yards.
It's the most important thing he has on his body, his ability to throw, right?
Yeah, eyesight, but yeah.
Yeah, besides like eyesight and like his feet to stand. I mean,
coming up, the top 5 body parts, BCB.
2 inches from the ground.
2 inches from the ground. All right. Check this out. This from our friends over at DraftKings, John. Tom Brady's next snap. And I saw there was a Tom Curran piece in which he said, people close to Brady think he's coming back. The Niners are the favorites right now in the DraftKings Sportsbook for Tom Brady's next destination, plus 150. The Raiders at plus 175. The Bucks at plus 250. And the Dolphins at plus 750. Those are the latest odds with old Tommy Boy, although he has not yet announced whether or not he's coming back. So let's talk about this Tom Brady situation. Trey Lance hurt, Brock Purdy hurt. And the Niners have flirted with Tom Brady before. Part of this is Tom coming back, but I think the other part of it is, and you and I were talking about this earlier, should the Niners actively be recruiting Tom Brady to not retire so that he can be their quarterback? Because I think if you are Kyle and John and you think Tom Brady would be a good fit for you this year, you're not sitting around waiting for Tom to announce his return. You are calling Tom, you're getting a meeting with Tom, and you're saying, Tom, I know you're on the fence, but here's why we can make it worth your while to come play at age 46. 46.
45 this year will be 6 next year.
And I do think they should sit down with Tom Brady.
I expect them to. Now, does it publicly get out? I don't know. Do you expect Tom Brady to announce I'm coming back and then do the thing, or just like he signed with a team?
That's a great question.
Not like a Schefter rumor. I'm saying like Tom Brady post, like I plan on playing one more year. Like TB12's website.
That's a good question. I mean, I think on one hand, I buy that he's not sure what he's going to do. Unlike last year where there was a lot of smoke on that he's going to go to the Dolphins thing, and that Florio was adamant. Him and Sean Payton were going to the Dolphins. That's why he retired. He was never actually retiring. I do buy at this moment in time he's not sure what he's going to do. But I think if you're Tom, I'm just talking through it. How do you decide that you're back without knowing where you're going to go? So I do think if he announces he's back, it is I'm back and I am Team X's quarterback, right?
Well, if you don't
like
know,
when the Niners trimmed at the 3 and like now we'll evaluate which quarterback we want.
Well, then there's probably a dating process coming on with a short list of candidates, right? Probably 3 teams. I would say the Dolphins, maybe the Jets, obviously the Vegas and the Niners. It'd be stunning if
Tampa would get a meeting just out of respect.
Who?
Tampa.
Yeah, but Josh McDaniels and Tom Brady are talking this offseason, right? That's a lock. There is a chance that the 49ers are not interested because they were not interested last year or last time around. That was 4 years ago. Remember when they told them we're just not interested? Has anything changed? I know they were coming off a Super Bowl, but I mean, they have 2 quarterbacks. One guy needs Tommy John, the other guy coming off a broken ankle. I understand the injuries impact it, but they just got to a conference championship game with Brock Purdy, who, and this is not an injury where he's not going to be able to throw again. My stance on this is not going to change. I think Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. I would not do it. I don't think he fits the offense. Their offensive line, like Lane Johnson ain't coming to the team. Like who they add in the right tackle is going to be able to protect. He can't move.
I think somebody wrote Colton McKivitz might be their next right tackle.
Well, that's fine, but he can't. He is not an athletic guy, obviously, relative to NFL players. He can't move, so your offensive playbook is dramatically different.
As Tim Kawakami wrote today, Brady has not missed a game due to injury in 14 years. 2008.
Yeah, durability's not his issue
because it doesn't get hit. Ball comes out quick.
Yeah.
Right. And he played on a team this year that could not. It was, I think, the worst rushing team in the history of playoff qualifying teams. Well, they're one of the worst rushing good teams in the history of the league. Good team meaning they made the playoff.
Obviously, Tom's historically a much better player than Purdy, but the second half of the season, when Purdy played and Tom played, Brock Purdy, as crazy as it's going to sound coming out of my mouth, was a better football player than Tom Brady. And simply because he could move.
Partly because he plays on the 49ers and Tom Brady plays for the Bucs, who can't run the football. We have to acknowledge that
would
Brock
they have
Purdy
been
on the Bucs may not have put up the same numbers.
But I agree, but I'm saying if you put Tom Brady on the 49ers, like some of those touchdowns came with Brock Purdy running around. Tom Brady would have thrown the ball away or hit the ground.
Maybe there was a right throw to make earlier and he would have made it.
Maybe.
I mean, so I took Brock Purdy's numbers, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 1,374 games. I took 60 yards out because he did that against the Chiefs, but I left the interception from the Chiefs game in. Let's just say 8 games. So you count Miami, you don't count Philly. 8 games for Brock. He played in the Chiefs game. Threw a pick.
Pretty.
I don't think you were still taking notes at that point. So 13 touchdowns, 4 picks, 1,310 yards basically in 8 games. Here's what that turns into over the course of 17 games. It turns into 27 touchdowns, which would have been 8th in the NFL. It turns into 9 interceptions, which is 19 quarterbacks in the league had 9 interceptions or more. So a very reasonable number. It turns into 2,958 passing yards, which would have been 19th in the NFL, between Mac Jones just ahead of him and Andy Dalton just behind him. And at 67.1% completion percentage, it has him tied for 7th with Patrick Mahomes. Those are all very good numbers. Okay. That's what Brock would be.
I appreciate the exercise you did, and I'm not trying to diminish what you're saying because it took effort. Little skewed though, because some of these games are blowing them out, right? So they start, it's not a true like the Raider game. There were some the Seattle game, there were just real games the whole time. He played in a couple games that by like the fourth quarter were kind of a joke, which is if you play in 17 games in the NFL, you're in probably 13, 14, just you play the full thing. Like it matters.
Sure. He might have a couple games with 330 yards, but he also might have a game with 3 picks. Like we didn't.
For sure. Yeah.
If we're going to be fair about this, Geno Smith had half of a good year and then turned back into Geno Smith, which is just good, but not MVP candidate. Brock Purdy played 8 games. I think Brock Purdy showed that he might be the quarterback of the future for the 49ers. Do we definitively know he's the franchise quarterback for the next 12 years?
No.
Of course not. So here's why I think you talked to Tom. You needed 3 quarterbacks to get through 2022. Currently, you have 2 quarterbacks, and they're both hurt. 4 quarterbacks, 5 quarterbacks. Currently, you got 2, and they're both hurt. Plus, maybe you go get Andy Dalton or something like that. Tom hasn't missed a game to injury in 14 years, which is your franchise's primary problem now for 5 years running. Your quarterbacks all get hurt, including Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins had a UCL. Here's the other thing. Brock
if you play forever, though, you're starting in 08. He'd already played 7 NFL seasons. He's bound to happen, guy.
Well, this might be the year, which is fine. You'll have Brock waiting if Tom gets hurt. And here's the other thing. Brock ain't going anywhere. He's good. I hate to bring up Steve Young because everyone always uses Steve Young and Joe Montana. And the reality
so does Jed.
Jed always uses it. The reality is that Steve Young, sitting around for 4.5 years and then becoming a Hall of Famer, he's the exception. He's not the rule. That situation is the exception. That situation is not the rule. But here's what I do think translates. Brock ain't losing his talent if he has to sit behind Tom Brady for a year. He's not losing his smarts. Steve Young sat around for 4 years. I mean, by the time he played, he was older than Brock, and Brock already has the experience. And I think he has already given you a great deal of confidence in him. And there is no confidence knock to Brock Purdy if you're like, Brock, we love you. Tom Brady is coming in here. You're going to be Tom Brady's backup quarterback. Okay, like I have faith that Brock Purdy doesn't get rattled by that. And I also think the Niners have been at the NFC Championship game the last 2 years. And I think they were capable of winning the Super Bowl. But I also think it's possible that if they ended up in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, who's kind of hobbled, or Joe Burrow, that in the end, the difference in quarterback talent might have been the difference in the game. And while they've been on the doorstep, they have not completed the deal. And Tom Brady has proven to be the greatest quarterback closer in the history of the sport in terms of we're going to win a championship with me as the quarterback. So I think you talk to Tom. I think you sign Tom if Tom wants to be your quarterback. I don't think you can pass on Tom, even though he's 46, because you got 2 injured quarterbacks right now. And there's no guarantee that one of them doesn't get hurt again. What happens if Brock gets hurt week 3? The Niners have proven to need multiple quarterbacks. So let's start with Tom Brady. And if it means we got to end up at Brock, that's fine. And if it means that Brock's got to wait a year to come back and be the starter again, I think he's fully capable of handling that situation. I have a lot of confidence in him. But I don't know that you can pass on Brock because unless you are now, here's the one thing I'll say. If Kyle Shanahan thinks adamantly those 8 games, I have a franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy. Like, okay, if you really believe that, then I say, fine, don't meet with Tom. But this team has not closed the deal. They have not. They've been to the Super Bowl. They've been to 2 NFC Championship games. They have not finished it off. And Tom Brady's won more Super Bowls than any quarterback in the history of the sport. So And his numbers, by the way, kind of
get-
similar to Brock's.
You sold me. I just double checked. 12's available.
12's available. He had no run game. What do you have his number? Tom's numbers in front of you? I think it was like 25 touchdowns and 6 interceptions or something along those lines. And I get it, John. I mean, I know
25 and 9,
25 and 9
67%, almost 4,800 yards, 4,700 yards
on a team with no run game. I mean, one of the worst run games in history. Now, to your point, Tom plays out of the shotgun a lot more than he used to, right? And Kyle loves, we're going to play action, turn our back.
Hold that point, Croft.
At the end of the day, has Kyle really had the most athletic quarterbacks playing his position?
No.
Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins. Brock's athletic, but he's not, Mahomes or Josh Allen. I think it can work.
Yeah, of course they would be able to figure out what works and what doesn't work. I just, in 2023, what translates athletic quarterbacks, movement at quarterback, I think that's a pretty big deal. Listen, he's the greatest quarterback of all time. He's a relic in the way he plays.
Yeah.
And you saw this year, like, part of it is they had injuries. Like, Trent Williams not guaranteed to play every game. He didn't play every game this year. You could just lose a guy. Guys get hurt, and then you can't protect. And you can't just run the ball, as we've seen over the years. Like, Kyle just doesn't get to run for 180 every game. Some games you do. Some games you have a solid day, and some games it does not work. Then you got to pass. How'd that go for Tom this year? I was wrong.
With
like
an offensive
Kyle,
coordinator that got fired.
I was wrong like every single person. Back, 4 years ago. I'm sure there are people listening that would have done it. But I'd say, obviously, the 49ers agreed, to not do it. I think we agreed with them. A lot of people agreed with them. That was a mistake. That's not debatable. And like you just alluded to, more than likely, they're probably a Super Bowl champion. Hard to see them not being a Super Bowl champion over the last 3 years with him, especially these last couple of years. But I short older players. Maybe it's the cynic in me. And now the other thing that was written, was it written in that piece by Sando? It's a rap sheet, I think, I saw it maybe an aggregator. I think he was on with Murph and Mac. And he said, Tom Brady's not playing anywhere next year for like $2 million. Like it's $30 million or something.
Yeah, it was the Sando or Kawakami piece wrote like maybe 20.
If you told me Tom Brady would come for like $10 million, of course. Like, am I paying him $35 million or something? Like on my cap? Like that limits who else I can sign.
Right.
I got some other holes.
My question this time around is like,
what is like 7?
What
give it to charity?
You're talking about real cost.
I'm kidding.
You're talking about real cost, which matters. But what is the opportunity cost of signing?
Go live in the building that's going up in Steph's backyard.
Just buy the thing out. Binoculars looking in the Steph's backyard. Well,
I see you, Steph. I see you.
Atherton, baby. Oh no, Brady moved in. This neighborhood's really gone to shit.
Just babes walking around these 4 condos.
What is really the opportunity cost here? Like, if this was Trey Lance's rookie year, you'd say, well, the opportunity cost is you don't develop this quarterback you just drafted. But at this point, developing Trey Lance is a secondary concern. He's been on the team 2 years. He's hurt. And
he's no longer a priority.
Whatever you think. Yeah, you are just not. When you make a quarterback decision, you are not making it with his development number one in your mind.
Agreed.
And I think Brock has proved, like, what do you think? Like, I think if you told me Brock's the backup for a year, how does he look when he comes back? I'd say the same, better. So, what is your opportunity cost? What are you losing by signing Tom Brady? If you don't care as much about Trey Lance's development, I guess you lose Brock's development. You lose that, right? A year of Brock playing, maybe. Brady, by the way, number 1 in the NFL in time to throw, 2.3 seconds. Brock Purdy, 2.85 seconds. Almost half a second longer to throw. And Jimmy, 2.53 seconds.
What do you think it would cost us to get a weekly with Tom Brady if he was a 49ers quarterback? Is there a number that would even get him to say yes?
I think so. I mean, why does he do the Jim Gray Sirius show?
Well, he now owns it. They moved that into a podcast that he owns it with Let's Go.
But I'm saying, like, why does he do it?
I think he had a deal with them, you know?
No, but I mean, like, what motivates Tom Brady to do it?
Clearly might like talking a little bit. Maybe he's friends with Jim.
A chance to, branch out a little, helps out the media empire a little bit, you're already very famous, but it keeps your name out there. You do, you just might have things you want to say. It's a way to communicate with people. You can interview whoever you want to interview. So,
50 grand?
Yeah. Like, my point is,
a week.
The money is relevant, is my point. Whatever the number is not what's relevant. Tom isn't doing it, well, I hate to do this, but I got to pay the mortgage. Like, that's not why Tom does it, right? It's not. It's not why Kyle Shanahan. It's not why.
It always helps to have new revenue sources, though.
Well, Tom was always on WEI for years, right? He was doing that weekly hit.
Yeah, where you are obligated to talk to, some of the partners.
That's true. But he got
right easy with Zolak.
The monetary value was not why he was doing it.
True. Again, I'm not against, for business reasons, Tom Brady. I just acknowledge.
You told me I convinced you.
You did, but I'm just saying, like, my argument coming into it was strictly just because he's old. But I do lean on the side of what you're saying. Like, there's no lost value. If he broke his leg in training camp, whatever.
Yeah, you're just back where you are already.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy, Trey Lance.
I do think the one concern would be like, okay, what are the numbers we're talking?
Yeah. Well, and the other concern would be, is there a scenario where him and Kyle together don't work and it actually kind of adversely affects your season?
Which you saw
Now,
Tom
there's
get
nothing in Tom's history that suggests that would happen.
I'd say Tom started getting a little weird in Tampa, forced the coach out, screamed a lot this year.
But they didn't lose game. Like, they were not worse off because of it.
I'd say him forcing Bruce Arians off, they were worse off this year. Bruce Arians doesn't lose.
They went to the Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl with Bruce.
But I'm saying this year, he got his way, forced the coach to quit, go up to the stairs. Very bizarre.
He had to retire in order to make that happen, though.
Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the next guy got fired.
It got very weird in Tampa, which he had a huge hand in the whole thing, right?
I think also Tampa the GM was the primary recruiter of Tom, Jason Light, right? It was Light, and then he got Bruce on the phone, and Bruce was just crazy Bruce.
And like letting Alex Guerrero travel. Like, they gave Tom everything that the Patriots wouldn't give him.
Yeah.
And part of it, I mean, it's crazy looking back because all Tampa did was make the playoffs and win a Super Bowl and host playoff games. Tom didn't have many suitors when he was 42 years old. Remember?
No. He looked bad at the end. Remember, that was part of it. He looked
Kyle
bad.
said no. Gruden said no. I don't know what the Dolphins were doing at the time, but clearly.
Who was that motherfucker? Who ended up being that motherfucker? You chose that motherfucker over me?
That was Derek.
Was it? Was that what it was?
That was Derek. He was just a 4-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, that's right. Part of it, we talked about Trey Lance. There was the article, the Mike Sando article that got a lot of attention a couple days ago. Anonymous executive, an exec from another team, told Mike Sando, I think the 49ers will trade Trey Lance to Tennessee. Then they'll end up with Brady, and Brady will play for 1 year. Then they have Brock as the backup. That's the chatter. They already have the defense. Brady wants to win one more. This is right up the Niners' alley. So Trey Lance to Tennessee. What do we think of the chatter from NFL executive?
What does chatter mean? I was thinking about that today. Chatter.
It means, it means somebody came up with this idea who's actually not on the Titans or the 49ers.
Yeah, to me, there's a different level of validity, right? If the chatter is like in agent circles because one agent talked to Don Yee and it's like, yeah, we've already heard some things, and it's like already like you're 1 degree of separation away. Like, this isn't that crazy. And just like, oh yeah, this the Vikings guy was bullshitting with Monty Osenfort and they were just shooting the shit and talking some different ideas. It's like, which is very possible. And that's where I think it's an easy thing to say the chatter because Rand Carthen is now the general manager of the Tennessee Titans. And I also think it's easy to push back and going, Rand Carthen is not telling you who they're trading for. Like, does Mike Vrabel like him? Because if he does, then yeah, it would be on the table. Does Mike Vrabel not like him? Then they're not doing it, right?
Yeah. Also, if you're Rand Carthen, you just got this job, but you are not Mike Vrabel's boss. So is Trey Lance the guy you're going to go bang the table for and say, Mike, I'm telling you, we got to trade for Trey Lance? Because you are really kind of putting your neck out there right away if you tell him he's got to go trade for Trey Lance. And
Is there a minimum draft pick that it just doesn't make sense for the 49ers? Like, even if I don't think he's that good, I know Rand knows what we all think of him.
Right.
So let's just say we're all in agreement. Like, we think there's still some potential there, but it is what it is now. He still makes a decent amount of money. It doesn't make a sense for us to just, why would we give him to you? Because if I'm like the Titans, the chatter is trading for him. If I can get him for a 4th round pick, well, who fucking cares?
Second.
Yeah, so it's like the Titans, they would gladly trade a 4th round pick right now, right? If you just said Trey Lance was available for a 4th round pick, a lot of teams would do that. But the Niners, it would make sense to just keep him and try to, if any, at minimum, just rehab some value or see if they still got something.
He might end up as your starting quarterback.
Yeah, to me, the second, then yeah, that would put some pressure on the Titans. But is that an option? Would you trade him right now for the Titans' 2nd round pick? Because I would.
Yeah, I think most people would. Right now today, the problem is I don't know who this, like, Trey Lance could end up. I might be trading my week 1 starter if I trade him today.
Because they have 3 3rd round picks, I'd argue I just keep him for a 3rd round pick. The second is where we start talking, right? Especially if it's a top 15 pick in the second. As someone in the chat mentioned, because I said the Niners were the 30th draft pick, don't forget Stephen Ross, when he cheated, he got docked a pick. So there were only 31 picks in the draft.
Oh, so,
so that pick is actually 29.
Good job to the chat for that one.
So, but that also means the 2nd rounders are a little bit better. I would not trade Trey Lance for a 3rd round pick, and I'm very leery that he's ever going to amount to anything, just because you still have the infrastructure of a head coach and guys that can make you better. But 2nd round pick, like, I'm sorry, I'd trade him.
Corey says, going to shake my head when Lance turns into a top 10 QB a year or 2 from now with the Niners or not. And everyone says hindsight's 2020. I'm not mortgaging my future again for Purdy. Played well, but no. The reason I would not trade Trey is not because I think he's about to be a top 10 quarterback. I don't think that. I think at this point, especially if you're pursuing Tom, or if you're not and you're just rolling both healthy, Brock as your starter, you would say that the Trey Lance draft pick it's been a failure. It's a failure, right? If Brock Purdy is your starting quarterback when both are healthy, the Trey Lance pick failed. You gave up 2 1s for a guy that didn't become your quarterback. However, Brock is hurt. You have a history of getting quarterbacks hurt. You have worked with Trey. I don't think it's, given all the crazy scenarios that have played out, I'm not saying just because right now in this moment the pick was a failure that it's impossible for Trey Lance to become a good quarterback. I'm not saying that. Maybe it can happen. On a team that has proven to need multiple quarterbacks, and you have this guy that you've invested a lot in already. I'm not saying just because you've invested a lot, you should just, continue to throw money at it. But you don't have other quarterbacks. So I'd be inclined to keep him, even if you're offering me pick 58. Just because I got to, now what am I replacing with? Andy Dalton? I would just be inclined to keep Trey another year. Now, maybe I'm just holding on to a depreciating asset. If that's the case, then that's the case. But, the scenario right now where he ends up playing 8 games or 5 games or whatever for you next year, it's a real scenario. I mean, Brock has not played a full season of NFL quarterback, and he got hurt in the season that he played 9 games. So Trey Lance.
I just had to double check. I've been beating the Andy Dalton drum.
Yeah,
he is an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, he's a free agent. Dalton, I think, is high on the list of what makes sense for the 49ers.
And there are going to be several other teams that are going to be interested in guys. Like, you'd have to compete. That number ends up going 5 or 6. I think the question is, would you rather have basically a quarterback room accounting on your salary cap, Trey, Purdy, or essentially like $9 million, Dalton 4 or 5, or Brady, which, like you said, you could argue there's no risk, but there is the risk of, if he were to finally get hurt, or just him and Kyle didn't mesh, and you do invest 28 guaranteed or 31 guaranteed, like, that is a lot for even a 1 year. You're not spreading that out over a couple of years, probably, right? unless Parag says it actually makes more sense to do a 2-year deal. And
Yeah, you probably. I wouldn't shock me if you sign a 2-year deal where it's like, an option after.
And his cap hits like $6 million this year. Push the can down the road.
Yeah. Well, when are you signing Bosa, Ayuk?
This offseason?
Okay.
Bosa for sure. Ayuk
12-year contract.
Yeah, I mean, Bosa's going to get.
Buy his parents' house for $27 million.
Well, he's got them
living it rent free.
I would imagine the Niners, right? Because they'll go, well, we got your 5th-year option, and we would 100% franchise tag you. We'll give you a 5-year extension, but it's essentially a 7-year extension, right? So you get the 5th-year option, you get the franchise tag, that money, and whatever we need to add up the difference is to get you to 120 guaranteed. But it's a 5-year extension or 6-year extension based on the 5th-year option, because that franchise tag, we're counting that as a year.
I saw Cam Inman had a quote today where Bosa said he doesn't necessarily need to be the highest paid player in the league.
It does feel like he loves playing for these guys, right? Because he comes, they're good, he's awesome, the defense revolves around him, and then they don't fuck with him until August 1st. He basically just going to leave. Debo's like, am I on that plan now too? Like, do you expect to see Debo around?
Well, Debo, if you want to go work with Nick, if you want to work out with Nick, then yes, you can be on that plan. But you have to be with Nick. Like, we need to see you in the videos with the Bosas, with Joey and Nick.
Yeah. Because do you expect, like, Debo Samuel to be at non-mandatory OTA practices?
Is Brady there?
That's another thing. Like, if I'm going to trade for Aaron Rodgers, if I'm going to sign Tom Brady, like, I get it. You guys have been on your own little plan, but kind of going to need you around. And then Debo, you got to come back. Got to work with Thomas here. It's kind of serious, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm the Jets and I'm going to trade a 1st and 2nd round pick for Aaron, like, Aaron, you do have to come then in May, right?
Really, there's not a scenario where the 49ers don't have a situation where they need that guy, where they need Debo to show up. Where it's like, hey, man, Trey Lance hasn't thrown a pass in September. We need you to work it with him. Hey, man, you and Brock have only practiced together for like 2 months. We need you to work out together. Hey, man, Tom Brady's new here. We need you to work out with him. Hey, man, Andy Dalton's the only healthy guy we got. And who knows? He might end up being the quarterback, but he may not. By the time we get to the regular camp, he might be the 3rd string guy. But then those other 2 guys get hurt, and Andy becomes the starter again, like week 3, and then you will have had to practice with him. So we just kind of need you around here.
Ayuk's like, don't worry, guys. I'll take 700 of the reps. And this year, instead of being 12th on the list of team captains, hopefully I can get up to 7th and be a captain.
Yeah, well, if Trey Lance is on the team this year, where is he in the captain voting?
Well, if Purdy's starting quarterback, is he a captain? Feels like he would be.
Where in the voting this year? 8?
Who?
Debo?
Yeah, he was right outside the line of the Mendoza line. He's like, oh, don't worry, Trey was right behind him. It's hard to make this team.
They do have a lot of captain-worthy players. I mean, that's legit.
Yeah. You want to do a Robbie Gold free agent breakdown, or we'll get to that later?
Yeah, how much is he taking it? Is he waiting until Tom signs to see how much is left?
I do think good teams would pay him. It's just nice to have a kicker that can just make kicks, right? I think a lot of coaches would just see Robbie Gold and be like, $4.5 million.
The thing you'd say, I wonder if you're Robbie, you're like, you know why I'm one of the best postseason kickers? Because I'm in the postseason a ton. And we don't score a lot of touchdowns. So just like, if I don't know, legacy, whatever that bullshit means. You'd say, Robbie, the other thing, Robbie would be like, I have to make a lot of tackles. Like, I don't love kicking off. Are the Niners this is another offseason conversation. Are they going to have to change their special teams coach again? It feels like Kyle does not want to, wouldn't do it. It's got to be house on fire in order for Kyle to grab the extinguisher. And it's just better than it was before.
In fairness, there aren't many good. It's not a position where very few and far between Dave Tobes and Rich Biscaccias. I mean, they're just not. There are way more offensive and defensive coordinators, it feels like, than good special teams coach. In fairness, all coaches trying to hire special teams coaches. It is a difficult thing to do.
And maybe I'd be curious if we looked like, do the best coverage teams play more of their starters on cover units than the 49ers do? Is that part of the formula? They don't. The other part of it is they don't kick the ball. They don't kick the ball in the end zone as much as most teams do. They can't physically.
Well, I did make fun of the one game when Wisnowski was doing the weird thing. I think he did lead the league in inside the 20s. And obviously Robbie didn't miss kicks. So I would just say,
I mean, kick off. They don't have a boomer.
I would say if you're not going to cover that well and it feels very hit or miss, if your punter's pinning them and your kicker's making kicks, can you kind of live with all the other like hit or miss? It sucks, but it's
the returns are just terrifying sometimes. But you're right. The coverage is what the coach is doing. Like Robbie Gould is not what the coach is doing.
What I think the 49ers should attempt to do, and they got a lot closer than I thought they would, is find like even a better version of Ray. Like can they get like a top 5 returner in the league?
The thing with Ray is he did work in the offense too when they needed him occasionally. It might be hard to upgrade that spot without going to the draft.
Well, could you draft like a guy in one of those 3rd round picks, like kind of a hybrid?
Yeah. Like, where did Britton Covey get drafted? He's not as good as Ray. No, maybe he was undrafted. Younger, Britton Covey, by the way, younger than Stetson Bennett, who we haven't talked about, got arrested. Did you see on the internet the other day, like, here is Stetson Bennett's arrest video? And I watched it. I'm like, wait, this looks like Johnny Manziel's. And then there was a little thing at the bottom from like Twitter. It's like, this video has been fact checked. This is Johnny Manziel's arrest video.
Oh, I thought it was Baker's in Arkansas.
Or Baker's. Yeah, sorry, not Johnny Manziel's. It was Baker.
Because I saw someone tweet that. I'm like, this is identical. This really happened to him too?
When I saw it. I thought it was really it. I'm like, yes.
What did you see? He was banging on people's door. You know, he's wasted at 6 a.m.
Oh, okay.
Did you see though?
Banging on what? Like homes or apartments?
Yeah, like his hotel room or you know.
You get arrested for that?
Well, 6 a.m. people called downstairs. You know, they got this drunk guy who wouldn't listen to anybody.
Yeah.
Someone was like, if this guy had just, I don't know, accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl, he wouldn't have been partying. He declined going to the Senior Bowl.
I would not draft Stetson Bennett in whatever round. I don't think he's it. He's not Brock Purdy.
Is he good enough? And I get he played long into the season to decline the Senior Bowl.
I mean, I don't think so.
That's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? You know what game Brock Purdy played in last year? Senior Bowl?
East-West game? Are you asking me?
Yeah, he did not play he played in the East-West Shrine game.
Which is where you'd prefer
But I just think like there's a line of like, I remember Mariota was supposed to go to the Senior Bowl, then decline last second. Like you're good enough to get drafted relatively high. I'd say about who?
Herbert went to the Senior Bowl.
I think consistently he's on the high end, but like 2nd round picks and on, if you get invited, you go to the All-Star game, whether it's Shrine game or the Senior Bowl, like at a quarterback.
Well, think about just even if you're selfish, like guys get drafted because they got coached in the Senior Bowl all the time by the guys that coached them all the time. He's
out on him. Don't ever compare him to Purdy.
Somebody needs to investigate if he graduated at Georgia 6 years in college. I thought about calling the registrar's office to ask, but I'll let somebody else do that. I'll let Bob McGinn do that research.
It'll come out. I just don't even care about him.
Yeah. Kyle's not drafting Blake Stetson Bennett. Blake. I don't know why I said Blake.
No chance.
He might draft somebody, but it's not going to be him.
Yeah.
You know, somebody made a comment to me the other day, and which is obvious when you say it out loud, but they were like, really when you think about it, if you look at Brock Purdy's career, you look at Trey Lance's college careers, and you just like blind resume it, like everyone would say that Brock Purdy would be a better NFL prospect than Trey Lance, just based on like the number of snaps they've played. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
Especially if you just told like you didn't know, you just said one guy's Power 5 conference, the other guy's Division I AA.
Right.
That's not the way, size.
Or at least like one guy is more ready to play right away. You would definitely say that. Maybe that's the better way to say it. Regardless.
Well, that would be the question. Like, can this guy get a lot better? Kyle would be like, hey, you just play like that, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, part of the Packers thing, maybe the Packers think Jordan Love might be good. After 4 years, he has a shot to be good, which would be, there's so many great stories, like Brock being one. If the Packers do this, like not even 2 decades in a row, like 2 eras in a row, I guess it'd be 3 eras in a row, go from Favre to Rodgers to Love. That'd be, because to do it again this much later is a whole different group of people doing it. Just
you could argue if Favre and Rodgers, Rodgers been the best quarterback, him and Brady a long time. Favre, same. I'd say if he would just turn out to be like Dak, that'd be incredible.
No, if he's just your starting quarterback, even if he's not as good as he doesn't have to be better than Aaron.
The odds are against it working.
I know, which is why, like, if it actually works, the problem is Aaron's better right now than Brett was at the end of his Packer career. I
Way
think.
better. But no, remember though, he went to Minnesota and Brett had one of his best years ever.
Came back, yeah.
I could see a little bit like that with Aaron and with the Jets. Like, I'm out to like prove everyone double F you and then I'll retire.
Aaron goes to the Jets for a year so he can go play for the 49ers after Tom. Just like, the Vikings, they weren't going to get him directly from the Packers. Goes to the Jets, tells the Jets, like, hey, I'm coming 1 year. And then I'm leaving to go play for the 49ers. What if the 49ers went Brady, Rodgers, Brock, back to back to back?
Yeah, I got to start, and then they signed Brady, then he retired, and then they signed Rodgers, and then he retired, and then I got to start again.
Imagine the negotiation with Aaron. Like, all right, Aaron, well, here's what Tom signed last year for $17 million. We're hoping you could just kind of inflation, do it for 19. And Aaron's like, I was thinking 60. I was thinking 60 million. Can we do 60 million?
Drugs are legal out here. You're good. You can fucking take ayahuasca, just fire on down the freeway. No one even cares.
You can go watch Tedford, bye week and go watch a Tedford team. Tedford will come up anytime you want.
He there in 2 years?
Good question. Yeah. I don't know. Hayner's at the Senior Bowl, I think, right? Jake Hayner to the Senior Bowl?
Stetson Bennett's no Hayner.
No, he's not. He's two-time national champ. Let's not forget. But all right. On that note, meaty.
Adios.
Later, everybody. Thanks for hanging.